So we just talked about the Microsoft 365 unattended license type, but then speaking of license types, we want to dive into this video any of the license types that Microsoft has available. So in previous videos, we've called them out a little bit more. So we've talked about full USLs, we've talked about the interest of from SA, we've spoken on some step-ups, like if you require additional functionality from a lower edition to a higher edition, and there's even something called add-ons. So we want to go through any of these services in the video. If you, for instance, license in an enterprise agreement, these options are all available to you. If you buy in CSP, many of these will not be available to you. It would just be full USL and add-on USLs. From SA and step-ups are not available in CSP. So to go over this in high level, user subscription license, you can buy in any of these flavors. So full USL is basically a license for new customers who haven't previously purchased any of the Microsoft 365 solutions from Microsoft, or for Microsoft on-premise software customers who are moving to the cloud but don't have any software assurance on their licenses. If you do have software assurance on your licenses, that's when you typically have the option to move to From SA, but there have been some recent updates to this. So From SA is basically a benefit that Microsoft has granted in the past to Microsoft customers that would transition from on-premise software to Microsoft 365's cloud subscriptions. So you would buy, for instance, Office Pro Plus with software assurance. That would mean you could translate that to the cloud service of Microsoft and receive From SA licenses for that service. However, for any new customers that are still migrating from on-premise to the Microsoft Cloud, the From SA benefit has been discontinued. So right now, if you have From SA licenses, you can actually continue those until the end of time as far as you want, but you cannot add any new From SA licenses anymore. And next to full USL and From SA USLs, you have add-on user subscription licenses, and add-ons are basically licenses that you can stack on top of other licenses. So either it being an on-premise license where you stack an add-on on top of to unlock cloud services, or a cloud service that you stack on top of another cloud service to unlock additional functionality. For instance, if you buy M365 E3, you can assign an add-on for Teams phone system standard to unlock the voice capabilities of Microsoft 365. And finally, you have step-up user subscription licenses, and these are typically for Microsoft 365 customers that want to move from a lower edition to a higher edition. An example I gave previously is if you buy Microsoft 365 F3, where you get an Exchange Online kiosk license with a 2 GB mailbox, but you would require 50 GB, for instance, you could add a step-up license to Exchange Online Plan 1 on top of Microsoft 365 F3 to unlock that additional functionality and get that 50 GB mailbox. So earlier we talked about how on-premise licenses translate to cloud subscription licenses, and you see that same visible representation here on the left-hand side. Now, if we look at the options for you to buy in an enterprise agreement, and let's take the example that you're still in an on-premise motion, but you want to move to the Microsoft Cloud, what you could do is add on to certain subscriptions like M365 E3 on top of your Pro desktop and unlock the benefits of the Microsoft Cloud on top of the on-premise products you already have. This add-on would mean that you basically don't have to pay anything extra aside from the charge that Microsoft calculates for you to use the cloud subscriptions. You have a lot of functionality on-prem, so Microsoft would not ask you to pay more for that functionality. It would just ask you to pay the premium to be able to use it as a cloud service. Now that means that if you had typically had a Pro or an enterprise desktop, you would add that add-on to M365, for instance, that you would arrive at a similar price of a full USL from Microsoft 365 E3. So an old school enterprise desktop plus an add-on to M365 would cost you about the same price as a Microsoft 365 license. So this is what an add-on could do, and what you see right now is all the different add-ons that Microsoft has in the M365 space. And this goes beyond add-ons on top of on-prem. It's also add-ons on top of other cloud products. So Microsoft 365 E5 Security is the full E5 security suite that you could stack on top of an enterprise E3 license. And how would this work? If you look at this table, you see all the products that are included here, all these add-ons, and you would see on the vertical axis where you could actually add this on top of. So a plus can be added. If it has a circle, it's already been included, and not available or not applicable is where it's not available. So an E5 security license is already included, obviously, in the entire Microsoft 365 E5 suite, but you could add it as an add-on to an E3 license. And let's take another example. If you have a Defender for Endpoint license, you could use it as an add-on to any of these products, but it would already be included in the E5 service itself. So the Defender for Endpoint could actually be added to most other products within the Office 365 and the M365 suite of products. Now this list goes on and on and on, and here you see even more products like Power Platform, storage, and other, and how you could potentially use this and what base license you would be required in order to add on this functionality. When we look at from SA pricing, we go back to the same overview again, where you see the professional and enterprise desktop. You have the add-on to M365 pricing, which would typically unlock the cloud services functionality of M365. But Microsoft had some additional ideas when they would require you to license an add-on, or when they would say, well, maybe it's time you just move to the cloud subscription license. So typically, if you have Pro or Enterprise Desktop, you would have an active contract, an EA contract for 3 years. And as long as that contract is running, Microsoft would not touch those licenses for Professional Enterprise Desktop. They wouldn't say, I'll give those to me and I'll give you a cloud subscription license in return. And rather, they would say, as long as you have an active contract, you would be best off buying that add-on. And when your renewal is up, so you need to renew your contract, then you could move to the full user subscription license. But then when confronted with the cost, Microsoft customers will say, oh, that's very expensive, making me move to that Microsoft full user subscription license. My SA cost used to be much lower than that. So Microsoft had the from SA pricing, where they would say, oh, if you transition from software assurance in your enterprise agreement, if you transition those on-premise products with software assurance to a Microsoft 365 subscription, we would give you from SA pricing. From SA pricing would basically say you've invested in software assurance in the past X amount of years. You know what? We'll give you a 15% premium to the full user subscription license and give you that from SA license, which includes all the functionality. But because you're such a loyal customer of ours over the past years, you would be getting that at a lower programmatic price. If you didn't have a Pro or Enterprise Desktop with software assurance, you would need to buy the full user subscription license against a higher price. But if you were coming off of software assurance, you could buy the from SA license. Like I said, this has been discontinued as Microsoft considers that most, if not all, customers that wanted to transition or migrate to the Microsoft 365 licenses have already done so. So they stated that from SA benefit should be removed. And if there's still people that are buying on-premise software assurance, they only would get the option as of January 2024 to migrate to full user subscription licenses, because they should have done the from SA migration prior to that time. And finally, we have step-up licenses. So a step-up license grants you the eligibility to move from a lower edition to a higher edition. So step-up licenses are only available in the enterprise agreement program and specific niche other programs, potentially like the MPSA. But in case of a cloud subscription, moving from a lower edition suite, for instance, even Office 365 E3 license, to a higher edition suite like a Microsoft 365 E3 license to unlock all the additional functionality there. It helps you to reduce cost on your subscriptions by allowing you to only pay for the additional set of features that is available in the higher edition. And when you acquire that step up, it replaces the lower level edition subscription license. So if you buy an Exchange Online Plan 1 step up on top of Exchange Online Kiosk, you cannot use that Exchange Online Plan 1 license for a different user. It should go to that user who you bought the step up for. That's important because in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, for instance, it won't show as a step up. It will just show the full functionality. So don't assign the step ups to anybody else than the person that you bought that step up for. As an alternative, you can always swap out the subscription license step ups for the full higher edition. A step up is great to buy within an active year of a contract, but at the anniversary, you should potentially think about swapping it out for the full higher edition. So these are all the top commercial step-ups. There's Microsoft 365 E3, where you can move to Microsoft 365 E5. There's Office 365 E3, where you can move to Office 365 E5, but you can also even move from Office 365 E5 to an M365 E5. So there's a lot of these step-ups available that you can use to your benefit that you should investigate. So when you buy a certain suite, always know what your options are to move to additional functionality that might make sense in the future for your roadmap.